The naval base was alive with the sound of drills, metal clanging, and boots pounding against concrete. The air was heavy with tension and salt from the nearby sea. New recruits lined up in formation under the scorching sun, beads of sweat running down their faces as senior officers barked orders. Among them was a woman, dressed plainly in civilian clothes, quietly observing everything from a distance. No one knew who she was. Her presence drew irritated glances, as if she were intruding in a world not meant for her. Her name was Admiral Helena Torres, one of the most decorated naval leaders in her country's history. But today, she wasn't here as an admiral. She was undercover, sent by the Defense Ministry to assess the morale and discipline of the lower ranks. No one had been informed of her visit, not even the base commander. Helena walked slowly through the compound, taking note of the office's behavior. What she saw disturbed her. Recruits were shouted at, humiliated, even shoved for minor mistakes. The leadership had grown arrogant, detached from the code of honor that once defined them. As she passed the training yard, a young cadet stumbled while carrying ammunition crates. The supervising officer, Lieutenant Drake, kicked the crate and spat at the cadet, shouting insults that cut deep. Helena's eyes darkened. She stepped closer, her calm voice carrying authority even without rank. "That's enough, Lieutenant," she said. Drake turned to her with annoyance. "Who the hell are you? Civilians aren't allowed here," he snapped. Helena held his gaze. "Someone who doesn't like seeing soldiers treated like dogs," she replied evenly. Drake laughed mockingly and gestured to his peers. "Look, everyone, we've got a moral preacher here." His tone was dripping with sarcasm. Another officer, Lieutenant Parker, joined in. "Maybe she's one of those journalists trying to dig up dirt," he said. "Better teach her some respect." Before Helena could speak again, Drake stepped closer, his face inches from hers. Then, in a flash of arrogance, he spat in her face. The courtyard went silent. Recruits froze mid-step. Helena wiped her cheek slowly, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, no one moved. Then she said quietly, "You've made a terrible mistake." Her voice was calm but carried a weight that made even the boldest men uneasy. She turned and walked away without another word, leaving them confused and sneering behind her. Within the hour, a convoy of black cars entered the base. A group of high-ranking naval officers stepped out, flanked by armed guards. The base commander, Admiral Scott, ran out to greet them. When he saw Helena among them, now dressed in full uniform with her medals gleaming under the sun, his face drained of color. The men who had mocked and spat at her stood at attention, pale as ghosts. Helena walked straight up to Drake, who now realized who she was, his commanding admiral, the highest-ranking officer in the fleet. He stammered, trying to salute, but she raised a hand to stop him. "Save it," she said coldly. The entire base was assembled in formation. Helena's voice rang out, sharp and controlled. "This base has forgotten what it means to wear this uniform. Discipline without respect is tyranny. Strength without honor is weakness." She turned her gaze directly to Drake and Parker. "An arrogance without conscience is poison to every command." The officers looked down, ashamed and trembling. "You represent this nation's defense, not its disgrace," she continued. "The people trust us with their safety. How dare you betray that trust for your ego?" Her words echoed across the yard, cutting deeper than any punishment could. Helena ordered an immediate inspection of all training facilities, interviews with recruits, and a full report on disciplinary practices. Over the next hours, she uncovered a web of corruption and abuse. Senior officers were extorting recruits for money, using intimidation to silence complaints, and falsifying performance reports to earn promotions. She worked tirelessly, refusing rest. Her mission wasn't revenge, it was reform. Late at night, She sat in the command office, reviewing files under dim light. Memories of her early years in the Navy came flooding back. The struggles she faced as a young woman in a male-dominated force, the endless battles to prove her worth not through gender, but through skill, courage, and honor. The next morning, she called for a closed assembly of all officers. Her tone was measured, her words deliberate. Some of you think power is about shouting louder, standing taller, or humiliating those below you. But real command, she said, is about responsibility. You lead by example, not intimidation. You earn respect. You don't demand it. Then she paused, letting the silence settle. I was once where these recruits are. I carried ammunition, cleaned decks, endured the same pain. But never once did I forget that every uniform deserves dignity. Her speech left the hall silent. Even the most hardened officers looked shaken. She then ordered the dishonorable discharge of Lieutenant Drake and Lieutenant Parker, effective immediately. When they protested, she stared at them with the calm authority of justice. You spat at your own commander, but worse, you spat on the values this uniform stands for, she said. Guards escorted them away. The recruits, who had once been terrified of these officers, now looked at Admiral Helena with a newfound reverence. Word of the incident spread through the entire Navy within days. News outlets ran stories titled, "The Admiral Who Was Spat On, and Changed Everything." Parliament praised her integrity, and the Defense Ministry announced a full investigation into abusive practices across all bases. But Helena avoided the spotlight. She didn't want fame. She wanted a culture change. Weeks later, she revisited the same training ground, this time openly. The recruits were drilling under new leadership, respectful yet strong, disciplined yet motivated. When they saw her, they saluted in perfect unison. Helena smiled faintly and addressed them. When I first came here, I saw fear. Today, I see pride. Remember this. The enemy is not always outside. Sometimes it's within us, arrogance, greed, or neglect. But if we keep our hearts aligned with duty and our minds grounded in respect, no force can defeat us. Her words were met with thunderous applause. The same sun that once burned harshly on the training ground now seemed gentler, shining on faces filled with renewed purpose. Years passed, and Admiral Helena Torres became a legend in the naval history of her country. Military academies taught her story as a lesson in humility and leadership. Cadets recited her quotes, and young officers swore to live by her example. Lieutenant Drake, years later, reportedly wrote her a letter from exile, apologizing for his arrogance and thanking her for teaching him what true honor meant. She never replied, but she kept the letter in her personal files as a reminder that even the hardest hearts can learn when faced with truth. Helena eventually retired after decades of service, leaving behind a Navy transformed by her principles. But the story of that day, the day when officers spat in her face and then realized she was their commanding admiral, became a symbol of justice, humility, and strength. It wasn't about humiliation or revenge. It was about restoring the soul of an institution. And in the quiet of her seaside home, looking out over the ocean she once commanded, Admiral Helena Torres would often whisper the words that defined her legacy: respect is earned not through fear, but through character. The sound of the waves would crash softly against the shore, like an echo of the salute that once greeted her across countless bases. The woman who had endured insult, commanded armies, and redefined leadership remained steadfast as ever, proof that true power lies not in rank, but in honor. And so, the story lived on, inspiring generations of soldiers, officers, and civilians alike, that dignity, when tested, becomes the greatest weapon of all. And that's how a single act of disrespect uncovered corruption, transformed a navy, and reminded the world that real leaders don't demand obedience, they earn it with integrity. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel History of States for more such true and powerful stories that shaped the world. Thank you for watching.